For the third video in my budget katana series, let's take a look at a Sheng-Sword Shobu Zukuri. Hello, this is Kyle, also known as AlienTude, and right up front I should say that this sword doesn't really fit into the budget range anymore. When I bought it secondhand, it sold new for around $350, which is at the top end of what I consider budget. Well, now this is all the way up to $480, and that's kind of what I have to consider the price at for the purposes of this review. So let's talk about Sheng-Sword for a little bit. Now, I don't really know much about them. I sent a few emails to their customer service asking for a little bit of background about them for the purposes of this review, and I never got a response. From what I can tell, they're based in Longchuan, China, and therefore most of their blades, fittings, and everything, they look like they're pretty bog standard for Longchuan, probably sourced from the same place most other forges seem to get them. They sell a pretty decent variety of katana, ranging from $170 all the way up to $2,600. But from what I can see, they enjoy something of a mixed reputation online. Taking a look at the saya. First off, I love the overall look of this. It's one of the things that drew me to buying this sword secondhand. It's got a glossy black lacquer, which does definitely show fingerprints. It also has this, I believe these are rattan wraps down the length of it, and a Samegawa panel here. Now, right where the Samegawa panel meets the rest of the saya, there's a kind of a ragged line. I'll put a close-up on screen to show it. And this is both noticeable visually and by touch. I think this is probably just not enough lacquer applied to cover it up. The sageo is a thick cotton, and it's decent enough without being anything special. The kojiri, kurigata, and koiguchi are all buffalo horn, which is a nice touch. Now, by far the worst part about the saya is the fit. When I bought it from secondhand, the seller noted that it was a tight fit. Well, when I got it, it became more than a tight fit. This is about as far in as it'll go. I spent about an hour filing at the koiguchi to try to get it to fit in a bit better, and I improved it by about 1/4 of an inch. But at this point, when it goes this far in, it feels like it's binding deeper into the saya than at the mouth. So filing's not going to help with that. It feels like the shaping down here somewhere is where it's actually binding it. I'm just not going to be able to really effectively file at that. So the saya is just not very useful. The Tsuka and koshirae. I'm going to talk about the aesthetics first and then move on to functionality afterwards. First off, this Ito, I really like the look of the gray. You don't see a whole lot of gray Ito, and it's a nice look. I think it looks really good. Now, Sheng-Sword lists this as silk. It doesn't feel like silk to me. It feels like cotton. Now, I don't really have a lot of experience with silk Ito, but it doesn't feel like silk. It doesn't feel like the silk that I expected to. It feels pretty much identical to the way the cotton Ito that I've used before feels. So I'm not so sure that Sheng-Sword is accurately describing it. It's wrapped in a kate tamake style or battle wrap. The manuki are a bronze color and with decent casting. I can't really tell what the design is on these, but I do really like the look of bronze. Most manuki are either going to be brass or blackened brass, basically. You don't really see a bronze look. I know, I tend to doubt it's actually bronze. I bet you it's just made to look like bronze, but it's a nice touch. I like that different color. The Samegawa is real, it's dyed black, and it's glued on top of the Tsuka. It's panels, not a full wrap, and there's a noticeable line where you can feel the panels end. I didn't notice this until really close inspection, but this is really low quality Samegawa panels. There's a few places on here where there's wooden pegs that are not the makugi, that are painted black to make it look like the Samegawa's there. I think they're filling in gaps on the Samegawa. That's just, Samegawa's not particularly expensive. You shouldn't need to patch it, especially on a sword that's almost $500. The Fuji and Kashira are both listed as steel. I'm not sure how accurate that is because this looks casted to me, and I'm not sure you can cast steel, but I'm not a metallurgist. In any case, they're painted a matte black, which is rubbing off a little bit, And they have a little bit of a simplistic design. The koshirae is kind of a floral design, and the fuchi is a even more simplistic geometric lines. I find the paint job on them makes them look a little cheap. The tsuba is also listed as steel, and the design is a tiger in bamboo. It might be considered hidden tiger. It's all painted black with a pretty thick layer of paint, which actually reduces the clarity of the design a little bit. Still, it's a little shinier than the paint on the fuchi and the koshirae, and that makes it look a little bit better. Maybe that's why one of the reasons the fuchi koshirae don't look that good is because it's a very matte paint. I don't know, but I do generally like the tsuba. The seppa are slightly different than your normal longchuan seppa. You know, most of the time they're just going to be pretty flat and have notches along the edges, whereas this has a pattern throughout the entire seppa. It's nice to see something different than just the normal ones. Unlike the habaki, which is absolutely standard for every kind of, longchuan katana you'll see. There's not really anything to say about it except that there's a lot of scratches and scuffs on it since it doesn't really fit the saya very well. Now for the functionality of the tsuka, the hilt, the whole thing, it all feels a little light and cheap. It's really hard to describe what I'm talking about here because it's something that doesn't come across visually. The entire tsuka feels very lightweight. The fuchi koshirae feel low quality as well as looking at, they claim it's steel. To me, it feels much more like a zinc alloy. And the tsuka itself just has such a light feel to it. It's like, is this actually hardwood? Is this a really good dense wood that's going to stand up to abuse? Maybe not abuse, but, use. The ito is not very tight. I can move it around very easily with very little effort. And, that's just going to get worse over time. So it's not what I would consider acceptably tight. Now, when I bought this, the seller told me that there was a little bit of looseness in the fit of the habaki, the seppa, the tsuba, and he fixed it by putting very small pieces of duct tape between the seppa and the tsuba. Well, it's still not tight. The habaki, the tsuba, and the fuchi are all loose. I can wiggle all of them. I don't know if you're going to hear that, but all three of those are just ever so slightly loose. Now it's possible that with the disassembly and more work, it could be tightened up. And now it's time to talk about the business end, the blade. Now, once again, measurements aren't going to happen this time. I believe next review I will be able to get measurements up, as my move is getting close to being, my garage is getting close to being usable again. But for now, it's still just a bit too much of a mess to really get good measurements. The one measurement I did get was the weight of the overall katana, which was 2 pounds, 9 ounces. There is a good amount of distal taper in it. You can probably see here, it starts nice and thick and has probably around a 40 to 50% distal taper, which is right where you want in a katana. Now, Sheng-Sword lists this as made from T10 tool steel, which is a very common steel to use in Longchuan China for katana. It's differentially hardened, and the hamon, it really pops. It's one of the things that drew me to this sword when I saw it listed. And unlike most Longchuan katana, this is not reverse polished. The hamon has actually got the milky appearance to it, and the shinogi, I don't think that's the right term, but the rest of the blade has a brighter polish. A lot of Longchuan China katanas you see will have the hamon be the brightest part, and then the milkiness will be on the other part. I'm glad to see that that's not the case here. It's nice to see. It's correctly polished. The surfaces of the blade are perfectly smooth. There's absolutely no rippling anywhere. And the shinogi-ji, this ridge line, follows the curve of the blade very evenly. Now, it is a little softer of a ridge than I would like. That's part of the polish. One of the harder parts of the polish, I believe, is keeping that ridge line nice and crisp and well defined. But it could be better, but it's not bad, that's for sure. The kasaki is well formed. There's no yakote, as this is a Shobu Zukuri design. and it's got a very nice, even grind to it that is very symmetrical and just well done. The edge beveling is excellent here. It's one smooth bevel all the way to the edge from the ridge line, as you'd expect on a katana. And there is some niku here. There's not a ton, but I can feel that it's not a super thin blade down towards the edge. It's got a little bit of niku in it. And sharpness-wise, let's test it out. Pretty sharp. It did catch a little bit there. So like right in here, it's got a little bit of dulling. Not a lot. I wouldn't even necessarily call it dulling, but it's not perfect there. Just the Kisaki. It's pretty sharp. There's a few spots where you can tell it's been used. You know, I've used it a decent number of times. But it's still very functionally sharp. Let's take a look at some cutting now. Overall, it cuts pretty well. However, I'll get to this more in the handling in just a moment. It does kind of blow through bottles a little bit more than I like. And that brings me to handling. So when I say it blows through bottles a little bit, the reason for that I feel it does that is because the blade is pretty substantial. You know, it's a 2-pound 9-ounce katana. That's pretty decent, right? That's right around where you would expect. But the entire Tsuka feels light. So this feels very blade heavy. It has a lot of blade presence to it. It's not even, the point of balance isn't even that far out. It's a little further out than I think I would typically see on a katana of this size, but it just feels forward heavy. It feels substantial in the blade, and the Tsuka does not. You know, when I'm holding it, when I'm moving it around, the Tsuka just feels cheap and light and doesn't feel good to hold and to swing. I don't know what that is, except, like I said, I think the wood material on the handle may not be the best wood. I don't know, but there's something about it that doesn't quite feel right in the hand. You know, I've handled a decent number of katana at this point, and I've never had one that gave me less confidence in the Tsuka than this one. And that includes the Cloudhammer katana I reviewed 2 weeks ago, where there was some rattle in the Tsuka where it sounded like the fit had gotten a little loose and the tang was rattling around a little bit. This one gives me less confidence than that one. And it's just because it feels odd. It feels odd is the best way to put it. The blade itself feels good. It moves around the way I expect it. It just doesn't feel right in the Tsuka. Let's take a look at a few areas that I think should be improved. Right up front, the entire Tsuka. I don't think this is going to be any surprise if you watch this video. This needs to be both tighter fitting and not feel so light and cheap. It does not inspire confidence in it. The saya fit really should be improved. Honestly, I think they chose a really bad saya for this blade because it binds deep into the saya, not at the koiguchi, and that means it's not a good fit. The last thing is pretty minor. I would really like to see the ridgeline here, the shinogi ji, a little bit crisper, a little more well-defined. I think that's a polish issue. It's not a big deal, it's just kind of a minor nitpick. And now it's time to talk bottom line. This katana is listed on Sheng-Sword's website for $480. Is it worth that price? No, it's not. There's entirely way too many problems with the mount on this katana. The habaki, suba, fuchi are all too loose. The Ito wrap is too loose. And the entire Tsuka and koshirae just have this really cheap, unpleasant feel that just completely make me lack confidence in the katana. The saya fit is also absolutely awful. That saya should not have been chosen for this katana. The blade is excellent. I do really like the blade. It's effective, it's sharp, it's beautiful, but it's completely let down by the mounting. You know, this entire Tsuka and koshirae is just not fit for a $480 katana. This is solidly mid-range here, and the problems here are just unacceptable at this price range, in my opinion, of course. Now, I do think this would make for an excellent project katana. You know, take the blade out, chuck the whole Tsuka, koshirae, all that stuff, and put all brand new stuff on it. You could have a heck of a katana here. But $480 for this blade alone and throw away all the mounting? No, that's not worth it. I'm sorry. And that's going to wrap up this review. Keep an eye out in 2 weeks for video number 4 of 5 in the Budget Katana series. But until then, Alien 2'd out.